Welcome to On the Entrepreneur's Journey. I'm Peter Santry, and this is a show where we explore how founders, CEOs, and operators scale their businesses, build real enterprise value, and create organizations that can grow beyond their direct involvement. Today's guest is Mike D'Angelo, the CEO of DeMayo Law Offices, LLP, a multi-office personal injury firm that's scaling across the Carolinas. Mike brings a unique perspective. He's spent the first 2/3 of his career scaling businesses in industries like medical and aviation, focusing on sales, marketing, and global expansion before making the jump into the legal world. And in personal injury law, the economics are very different. In a 100% contingency-based business, revenue is variable, fixed costs are real, case selection is critical, and the true asset of the firm often isn't recurring revenue, it's the case inventory. In this conversation, we'll uncover how you scale revenue without simply adding more lawyers, how contributory negligence laws affect intake and qualification, the legal model DeMayo uses to streamline its operations, and how technology and AI are increasing leverage without eliminating the human element. We'll also talk about what Mike is seeing across the country in his consulting work with other legal law firms and why many firms struggle with operations even when they're excellent lawyers. And we all know lawyers struggle with the business side. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Peter. Happy to be here.
Good. So I find it fascinating that you spent 2/3 of your life in companies and in industry, and you find yourself now in a law firm, a contingency-based one at that. So tell us how your background, how you got there, but how your background sort of helps you, as a COO, run a law firm.
Yeah. I know. I even some days I wonder how I got here. But it's been a great journey. I feel like the experience that I gained working for businesses, scaling them, growing them, whether they were domestic or global, has really given me a great foundation for what I'm doing today. It was kind of one of those paths I didn't set out to get to where I am, or thought that I would end up here. But I certainly welcomed. I'm enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. And I really think I've been able to use that experience that I gained doing what I did for the first 2/3 of my career. Some of the things there's some things that are very relatable and similar, and then there's other things that are very different. But, when you're in a business, you typically, in my case, I was working with tangible products, real things that were either manufactured, built, or sold, and they were sold domestically or globally. And going through that process, it's really, if you think about it, it's really similar to have a tangible product. And in my case, in the legal industry now, working for a personal injury law firm, that product is our case. And
Mm-hmm.
so, some people use the term widgets. I mean, it's a product, and we have a case inventory just like we had a product inventory. So therein lies one of the major similarities. And I've always been able to kind of visualize in my mind how that product kind of flows through whatever process it goes through to end up at the client or with the client. And whether it's a product going down or traveling down a manufacturing line where there's engineering involved and it's being built and tested and quality tested, it's really no different from a case. I mean, the case has to flow throughout the firm, from the time that it comes in as a lead or a potential client has to be qualified, and it flows through the law firm just like I think of a product flowing through a manufacturing line or an assembly line, if you think of it that way.
Right. And it's, I mean, every there's really only one universal business model, and that's you got to get work and you got to do work and you got to get paid. And so, you apply it across that. But interestingly, how did you make the jump? I'm sort of thinking, it would be a major tack away to just say, I'm going to go to a law firm. What was the opportunity you saw, and why did you make the jump?
Yeah, there's a little story behind that, as you can imagine. It's one of those things that I think right place, right time. I was working for an aviation company that part of my role was the logistics behind fueling aircraft and the logistics of getting fuel all across the country at the right time, right place at major airports or even small airports is really important, right? It's travel. And I actually was doing a site visit in Raleigh, and I was introduced to someone who had a private aircraft parked there, and they were having. He's also a pilot and also an attorney. And so we just struck up a conversation and we provided fuel for that location and everything was running smoothly. But just a simple conversation was struck up and we kept in touch. And he owns a second generation law firm, personal injury, ironically. And one thing led to another that he was looking to scale his law firm. And we just started having conversations over that. And it ended up that he was looking for someone who had not been in the legal industry. He thought if he brought in a business minded person into his law firm to run it like a business, that it would benefit him and his law firm. And that led to a job opportunity, which was my first COO job opportunity in legal.
Mhm.
And that was over in Raleigh, North Carolina. And, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose maybe in the first 6 to 8 months, just again, trying
Right.
to
Yeah.
find the relatable things from the business world to the legal side, and did that. And I would say within the first year, I became pretty in depth of, how a case flows through a law firm and specifically a personal injury law firm. And
Mm.
we had a lot of great successes there while I was there during my time, and they continue to scale their business, and they're in good hands right now. And now I'm at DeMayo Law Offices.
Yeah. Yeah, you dove back into the pool a second time. So let's dig into that a little because what I find in having coached some law firms is that they're kind of two business models. There's the one where the lawyer does all aspects of it. Attracts the client, prosecutes the case or takes it through the process, and then deals with it. And then there are some that are, I guess, structured more like a business where you have a traditional sales role or marketing and sales role, business development, bringing something in to execute in the sort of operations side of the business. And then, of course, the finance and admin take care of the getting paid part of it. So how do you scale, or what model did you choose as you looked at these firms to say, we want to scale, we want to open up offices, but we don't want to just hire a bunch of lawyers. How can we make this efficient? How can we reap higher profitability from our scaling?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, you first go into something like this, and I think the most important thing to do is observe, right, and learn
Hmm.
how they're doing it currently. And one of the things that I saw was in a way to scale is allowing the attorneys to do attorney things only. And I don't mean that restricting them, but in the sense of using their background, their JD and all their experience to do what we highly get paid for, and that is for their legal experience and giving legal advice. So when I looked at it that way, it really struck me that we can get a lot of that, everything around what the attorney doesn't need to do, done by others that maybe don't have that level of education, but certainly have the experience to do it well. So, what I found is that if you're going to be more of a volume based law firm, especially in personal injury, it made more sense to streamline the process as to how that case flows through the firm and not have an attorney do, in our case, what I would call kind of cradle to grave type of model, where that attorney and or paralegal or a small team or group of people would kind of do everything. The way I ended up setting it up is let people do what they do best and do more of it. So, meaning that the attorneys did what they did best and they gave legal advice, and that's what they did mostly during their time. But then we would have, for example, an intake specialist would qualify leads that would come in, whether they're digitally or by phone. And that's what they're trained and that's what they do best. And they could do more volume of those and do a better job of either signing up those potential clients over the phone. And then all the way through the firm, as the case, once it turns into a case and you sign somebody up, as it flows through, we just kind of looked at every process that case flow, where it flows and how it flows through, and use the same principle. Let them do what they do best. And they actually got better at it over time because there's a lot of repetitiveness. So if, for example, on a certain level case, we would have negotiators, certified negotiators, negotiate with the insurance adjuster under the supervision of the attorney.
Hmm.
And I kind of think of that as almost like a PA in the medical field is working under a doctor. Now,
Right.
obviously, you can handle more patients, we can handle more clients by doing that, which gives us a little more volume. And it
Mhm.
also keeps the attorney doing what they do best. It keeps the negotiator doing what they do best and bringing the most value to our clients.
Yeah. So you chose the specialization route, which is not surprising given your background, and that's probably one of the reasons why you were hired initially was to look at that and make that decision. But I guess the downside, especially if you're in a contingency-based firm, is that there's a cost structure that comes with that specialization. So, you have some fixed costs, you have some salaries that you have to pay, yet your revenue model is one of successfully winning cases because contingency by definition means you need to win to get paid. So how do you balance that? I mean, I'm sure you want to try to minimize your fixed expenses because of the revenue model, but is there a tension? Is the business recurring enough so that I'm overblowing this situation, or is it something that does that keep you up at night?
I think any costs, especially as they've been rising over the last few years,
Yeah.
especially, certainly worries us. But at the same time, there's a lot of things you can do to either cap those or get more efficient ways of doing it. So certainly technology comes into play.
Yeah.
Using tools technology wise to have our people have access to those tools. So again, that they can do their job in the most productive, efficient way is one way of doing it. Streamlining it and just being, as I mentioned earlier, being as efficient as we can doing that with the right people in those places that get really good at doing what they do, not only brings value to the clients, but also brings that streamlining and less costs. And then probably thirdly, what's really played into this model is some of the AI that's been introduced over the last couple of years as well, and just seems to be moving at a very rapid pace. So a
Yeah.
combination of all those things.
Okay, so that's the cost side, but how variable is your revenue? I mean, is can I'm not that familiar, but is it a sawtooth, or is it something where the caseload is fairly predictable and is you don't have the volatility on the revenue side that I'm imagining.
No, there is some volatility, but it is again in some ways predictable. So it's always a challenge, right? And I
Yeah.
think whether you're in the business world or in a law firm, it's always a challenge to predict, especially when you have some of these variables that you can't always control. But, the longer I have found that either the law firm is in business that's been around, you have historical data. And that's one of the first things that I always try to go back to is national trends as well as historical data so that we can benchmark. And if we can benchmark, for example, the average type of case that flows through the law firm, we can benchmark somewhat what those results are going to be, in financial dollars, like a settlement, at
Yeah.
least a range. Then we
Right.
can also look at the historical data of how much time on desk is what we call it in the legal industry, does it take for that case to flow through from beginning to end or cradle to grave?
Right.
And when I started looking at that historical information, you can really come up with a way to forecast, just like you do in the sales world or the business world from sales. You can really start to forecast what's in your pipeline, and that's your case inventory, and where the results are going to be. Now, you're not going to pinpoint the day, that something's going to happen, but you can certainly probably get it down to a quarter is what I started with, is trying to see how accurate we could forecast per quarter. And then you could start breaking that down per month. And we're actually forecasting now by weeks. Now, it's not 100% accurate because
Right.
there's other variables that come into play that are beyond our control. But the law of averages is going to get us pretty close. So that's what helps us make it a little more predictable.
Right, right. So you've been around for a while. You're taking the type of cases that you're taking, and I guess that all comes down to, I mean, the most important person in the firm is probably the one who discerns which cases to take and which not, because you don't want to have unproductive cases that you lose, and then you have that expense load that isn't covered by any revenue. So, how important in and how how does that person or that function inform your profitability?
Yeah, it's really important. And I always say it always starts at the intake level, right? That's where your leads are coming in. However, you're driving or marketing your brand and getting those leads to come in. People are either calling over the phone, digitally, templates are coming in electronically. So all these different ways of things coming in. So our intake department certainly is vital. It's where it all starts. So what we tend to do, we want to make sure that the cases that we're taking, first of all, that we can help our clients. We don't want to waste their time or give them false hope. So we're doing a qualification process, and we want that qualification process to be sustainable and repeatable. And so we train our intake specialists, and they're overseen by an intake manager, as well as we have an intake attorney. And that intake attorney has the final say of whether we're going to accept that case or not. But all of our intake specialists, we've put together a set of kind of questions or a script for typical personal injury cases or workers' comp cases, whatever practice area that we're looking at. And that intake specialist, by asking and getting information on those questions or script, can actually decipher whether that case qualifies for us to take that in. And then our intake attorney, of course, would review that just to make sure that that looks like a case that's viable. We can help the client and add value to it.
So, kind of last question on that sort of business model side of things. What's an average win rate for DeMayo? I mean, do you have I'm sure you take some losses, maybe not, maybe you never lose, but are we talking about 60, 70%, 90%? Or I'm sure you look at the number.
Yeah, we're in the upper 90% range, somewhere
Right.
between 96, 98% of success. So again, every state's a little different too, where you get into whether there's contributory negligence, which North Carolina is probably one of very few states that still has that. So if you're even at 1% or more at fault, it's very, very difficult in the state of North Carolina, for example, to win against an insurance company because that client potentially has some fault. So, you can see that or examine that not only by talking to the client, but also what the police report, if it happens to be an auto wreck or a wrongful death or whatever the case may be. We look at that very closely as we're qualifying the cases. We just don't want to put all the resources into a case and give false hope to the client if at the end of the day we can't really help them or get what they're looking to get out of doing business with us.
Right, right. And I guess the answer is too, I mean, with that type of win rate, I'm sure there are some that are less profitable than others, but with a win rate like that, you've got to, I can't believe you're not profitable at the end of the day quite nicely. So okay. So let's back up a little bit and sort of talk about what you're doing on the consulting side, which is with law firms in general. What are the challenges that you're seeing, and are they running as profitably and as well, and have they adopted the business models that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's again an interesting and fascinating industry, which is the more I'm in it, the more I like it and I'm enjoying it. One of the things that I've seen, and I've learned over the years is that still to this day, we have about 68 to 69% of all personal injury law firms in the United States are still owned by a baby boomer. So we have that last generation of baby boomers that became attorneys that now are either the founder or the CEO or majority owner of law firms. And it's also one of the last industries that hasn't been really consolidated as much as other industries, like the medical industry. I
Right.
think we saw that happen several years ago. We're starting to see that happen. But with the age or aging out of the ownership, we're going to see the largest transfer of an industry of money over the next 5 to 10 years, believe it or not. So it really is primed for people to help manage or bring business abilities to law firms. A lot of the baby boomers didn't live through the technology age, so they're running a law firm typically that just hasn't introduced a lot of technology to it in some cases, or they've brought somebody in that, and oftentimes law firms, as you can imagine, tend to promote people from within, and that front desk receptionist maybe became the office manager, who then became the operations manager, who really never worked anywhere else or worked in technology. And they're thrown into these situations. They're doing the best they can with what they have. But we see a lot of, I guess to say, we see a lot of outdated or not up to date running firms like a business. And so we see a lot of that, and a lot of them could use a little bit of help or some guidance in certain areas and optimizing their business or optimizing their case flow, marketing. And as I said earlier, it really does all start at the intake level. And it's become so competitive in our industry that, if you're spending money on marketing dollars, you want to try to capture every lead you can that makes sense where you can add value for that client.
So let's run with that for a little bit. The where is the capital coming from to facilitate that transfer of ownership? Because yes, heretofore we haven't seen a consolidation of the field, and I'm wondering, one of the classic players to do that would be private equity. I'm wondering if they see the contingency basis of this and get a little bit squirrely around how much can I leverage an uncertain revenue stream. But as we said, your win rates are high, and the predictability now you're able to forecast. I'm wondering what's holding back traditional sources of capital to facilitate the transfer of those companies to next generation or to private equity. I wonder what's holding it back. Is it and what are the valuations too? That's the other question: is can you get a good valuation for a contingency based offer?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and this is what I've seen. This is my opinion. Our own industry has held it back because they're attorneys. And
Mm,
legally, they have kind of fought this off. But it's what I'm seeing is I'm starting to see the tide turning. So it started, what I saw, it kind of crept in about, I'm going to say roughly 5 to 7 years ago. You started hearing and seeing, and I've educated myself in things called ABSs. ABSs stand for all but structured law firms. And a few states did some testing where they allowed all ABSs or all but structured law firms to actually exist without having, because most states have an attorney has to own a law firm.
hmm
And now you have states like Arizona, Utah, Oregon, Washington that are now allowing non-attorney ownership of law firms, which opened the door for private equity to come in and fund a law firm. So legal advice still has to be given by attorneys. So they have to hire attorneys, but they can be owned by private equity. The private equity has found a way to make money. And what they've seen is that the more they understand the case value of the inventory, the more they understand how investing capital can have some really good gains to their investors.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if the banks are willing to finance that cash flow stream because private equity runs on leverage, and
Right.
it's one of those things where you need to get the returns you want. Generally, they do throw some amount of leverage on it, and so let's get into that a little bit. Since you're a businessman, what are the traditional valuations and how much leverage can you get in funding a mature contingency based personal injury law firm? Just in
Yeah,
general, I'm sure there's some parameters.
yeah, and I also believe what's happened too is, the one of the bigger mass tort cases across the country by the Department of Navy that's dealing with Camp Lejeune. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've heard of that,
I have.
contaminated water that happened over many decades. Is one of the larger mass tort cases, which has brought in a lot of private equity, and they've learned how to evaluate these cases, whether it turns out to be, 5 to 1, 7 to 1 investment per, what the net gains are. And they've really proven out some of those theories already. So what you're seeing a lot of PE or private equity with private funding with higher interest rates investing, but they can still all make money off of that because the net gain is still quite large on the returns, as opposed to going to a traditional bank or some of your large banks tend to not get, at least I have not seen it yet. They don't seem to understand the evaluation of the cases. So the asset of the cases are just not valued in the same way. They still go back and look at hard assets, buildings, cash
Yeah.
flow. And so you're not seeing the investment by banking per se as much coming into the legal industry, but we're seeing a lot of private equity to the point where now I'm starting to hear, I feel like the floodgates are opening a little bit. Private equity is even kind of found what I call a workaround. In fact, I just heard they bought and acquired and invested in a large law firm in Louisiana, but they separated the attorney side out from the rest of the staff and the cases. And they bought the staff and the cases, which is 100% legal, but they can't own a law firm. So they're not owning the attorneys in that case. So they can get very creative when there's money to be made and also value to be had for their investment.
There's an operating agreement between the legal side that's prosecuting the caseload. So let me just finish that thought then. Are the multiples, what would be a multiple of cash flow or revenue that's starting to emerge as being financeable these days and attracting capital?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I don't feel comfortable really stating that
Yeah,
number because I haven't been involved in a deal recently.
yeah,
But I was seeing in some cases, again, look, depending on the value of the case,
right.
you can see a case be, and they tend to talk in ratios, anywhere from 3 to 1 all the way up to 7 to 1. So the investment versus the output that you get is pretty common depending on the category of cases.
Right. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
if that helps.
Yeah. No, I'm curious because I could see this being another area that starts to experience what a lot of mainstream businesses are experiencing, which is as baby boomers retire, and so I'm sort of interested in that. Okay, so looking forward, Mike, what is the plan for DeMayo in terms of what you've opened 3 offices, you're in the Carolinas. What's the plan for the partners here? What are you guys trying to do?
Yeah, we're trying to scale more and be more efficient at the same time. So we've incorporated some technology, some AI as well. We've also are in the process of revisiting some of, it's continuous improvement in my line of work.
Yeah,
Always looking at processes and how can we do them better? Is there a gap there to improve on it to gain more efficiency? So I am seeing some technology helping us do that. I'm seeing it in the model that we're using. And our goals are to capture more market share where we are right now in the Carolinas. There's still room for us to capture more market share, even though Michael DeMayo's been in business for 33 years plus now. And we're at the same time, we're having competition come in, and we're also seeing law firms, because of private equity, you take a law firm even like DeMayo, who maybe be in the Carolinas, can then go national if you've got private equity coming in and, pushing funds in there for marketing. It gives them and it gives us potentially an opportunity to go nationally, which I could see that being a potential opportunity in the near future.
And so you're big enough to attract that kind of investment. So
We
that,
believe so, or we're
yeah.
on our way there anyway.
Yeah, well, it's certainly an interesting time in the space,
Yeah.
and I love that. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it off here, Mike. And I appreciate your bringing your business sense to make sense of this business to us, and also how you're helping other law firms do the same. Because there's one thing we do know is that lawyers think they know everything, and maybe that they need business help from a person like you. So we'll leave it there, and thank you to the audience for joining us today on the Entrepreneur's Journey.
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.